When miking a snare drum, the SM57 is the first mic most people will go for, and rightly so. It has rugged construction, it sounds great, and it can handle the high sound pressure levels that a snare drum will produce. But snare drums have a lot of different sounds, so here at Gear4music, we're going to go through our top 5 choices for microphones other than the SM57. The drums are often the most important driving force for music, and that can be either live or it can be in the studio. And the snare drum itself is one of the most integral parts of the drum kit. So even though we've got lots of different microphones here, the first thing that you need to do when miking up a snare drum is making sure that the snare itself sounds great, because a microphone is just going to amplify the sound source that you're actually pointing it at. So make sure that the snare drum itself first is tuned well. Use some moon gel if it's got too much resonances, but get it sounding good in the room before you actually place a microphone on there. There are lots of different ways that you can mic a snare drum, and in this test, all of these microphones are going to be pointed at the place where the drummer is hitting the snare. So with an SM57, for example, and with any of these microphones, most of them are going to be pointing at the middle of the snare and be about 3 fingers away, just so that the sound can actually build a little bit and you're not just getting the sound of the skin itself. Some people will also use a drumstick and they'll point it towards the middle of the snare drum so that it knows exactly where it's pointing. But me personally, I just like to eyeball it. You can actually see where it's pointing. It's up to you however you want to do that. As it's most widely used, first of all, we're going to have a listen to the 57 to see how that sounds on this snare drum. Now, in this test, first of all, we're going to hear the drum kit itself with no processing. Then we're going to hear the snare itself again with no processing. Then we'll add some EQ to the snare. And then finally, we'll hear the whole drum kit completely processed. So first of all, let's listen to the 57. So now we've listened to the SM57, let's jump into our list of other microphones. The first one we have is the classic Sennheiser MD421. Now this microphone is widely used on toms. I've seen it being used on bass cabs and guitar cabs as well, but it also sounds great on the snare. Now the other thing with this microphone is it is really good on other sound sources as well. And on the back of the microphone itself, you've actually got a roll-off knob here which goes between 5 different modes, M being for music and S being for speech. So let's see how this classic multifunctional microphone will shape up on the snare drum. So next up, we have the Lewitt DTP340. Now this is the first microphone that we see that has a clamp that goes onto the side of the snare itself. The microphone is actually made specifically for percussion. So it's really great on a snare. It's also good on a tom, and you can use it on bongos and that type of thing as well. The microphone has a supercardioid polar pattern, and what that means is it's very directional, and it blocks out any excess noise from all other areas except for where the actual microphone diaphragm is pointing. So this is really great when it comes to the snare drum, because a lot of drummers will have their hi-hats close to the snare and we get a lot of bleed. So the supercardioid will stop the bleed coming into the microphone of the snare and will give us the options to process that even further without any issues in those higher harsh frequencies. Next on the list is the Sennheiser E904. Now this microphone, like the previous one, has got a clip on the side of it as well, so you can actually clamp it to a snare drum or onto a tom. And personally, I use this microphone a lot in the Gear4music studio on toms because it sounds fantastic. And I'm really excited to see how it sounds on a snare. So let's check it out. Up next, we have the G4M PCM10. Now, this microphone is a little bit different to the others that we've looked at due to the fact that it has an interchangeable capsule. So this will change the polar pattern of the microphone itself. When we were recording the snare drum, we were using the supercardioid function. This also excels as overheads if you use the Omni capsule. Also included in the box is it does have a cardioid polar pattern. Now, the other really cool thing about this microphone is the fact that it has this anti-shock mount. So that means that any unwanted rumbling in those lower frequencies are all going to be eliminated due to the fact that there is no vibration on the actual microphone itself. So let's see how it sounds on a snare. So last but not least, we have the Shure Beta 181. Now, this microphone itself, like the previous, does have interchangeable capsules. That being said, each of the capsules are sold separately. For the snare drum situation, we are using the supercardioid just due to the fact that it has a lot of rejection of the outside sounds and will give us the sound source that we need. It is also a side address microphone, so again, it's going to be getting rid of that bleed from the hi-hat, even if the hi-hats are really, really close to the snare drum. Now, in the studio, I use this microphone a lot, and you'll see it on a lot of our videos, just due to the fact that it gives you a fantastic representation of the snare drum itself. Again, without that bleed, so that you can really process the snare the way that you want it to sound. So let's see what it sounds like. So there you have it. There's our top 5 microphones for a snare drum other than the SM57. We've also added the 57 in there just so you can have a compare. Now, there are a lot of different microphones that you can use for the snare drum, as we said. So if yours wasn't in the list, make sure you put it in the comments below. And while you're there, make sure you tell us which one of these microphones you thought would suit you best. If you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. My name's Rick. I'll see you next time.